I love that song. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 50/50 Festival and this special session where we're going to talk to you about young people and how they feel they're represented in the media. My name is Shanice, and I'm a digital journalist for BBC Young Reporter. So basically, I help support young people from across the UK share their unique stories. But before we introduce the panel, we wanted you all to have a look at this great video produced by some students at Falmouth University who have been working with the 50/50 project in partnership to create content to really highlight new voices and people who should feature in the media more but aren't heard. So this is Amy's story.
I definitely remember thinking that jobs were gendered. Anything more physical has always kind of been represented as a men's job, which it shouldn't be and doesn't have to be. My name's Amy O'Brien. I'm 31 and I'm a fisherman. There was a bit of a weird kind of reception when I first started. I got a lot of funny looks around the harbour, and a lot of people were like, what's she doing? Why is she going fishing? Like, girls don't go fishing. But it doesn't matter if I'm a man or a woman, I'm crew.
Despite coming up against prejudice, Amy is challenging the stereotypes around the representation of women within fishing.
Yeah, I think in every industry it's important that it's shown that men and women can do all these jobs. Because, you know, to get a break in fishing, I had to nag captains for a good few months for someone to take me to sea, even though I've got more qualifications than most of the men in this harbour. And I've been a mariner for 10 years. It took a long time to actually convince someone that I was able.
Amy's different perspective on the fishing industry is what 50/50 partners like ABC Australia are seeking out by leading the way in having female voices represented.
We are telling better stories because we're including a wider variety of voices in our content. We're not just going to those usual suspects, the quick hits, the people that have been in our contact books. It's made us think harder about the people that we're going to and including more voices in our journalism, which is just going to make it better.
ABC bringing different perspectives to light is something Amy very much supports, and why she tries to promote what she does on social media.
A few friends of mine who have got young children, especially daughters, have said that they've shown my page to their kids, and you know, like my friend Matt's little girl, she's 14, and she said that she saw my page and was like, oh wow, I didn't know girls could go fishing. And you know, I do think it's important to keep promoting that and being like, actually, yeah, I'm a chick and I'm doing this job and it's normal and anyone can do it.
So we're now going to introduce our panel. We'll go to each one of you individually and take it in turns. Let's go to Nina first.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi Nina, how you doing? Introduce yourself.
Oh, good. Hi everyone, really great to have you at the final session, the finale, should I say, of the 50/50 Festival. I'm Nina Goswami, I'm the BBC's Creative Diversity Lead, and I run the 50/50 project, which started in the heart of the London newsroom. And it started to look at the representation of women. We wanted to see how we could increase the number of women on our content. And we do something very simple. We count the number of men and number of women on our programs to see if we can reach 50% women representation over a set period of time. And today we published the figures that have for a challenge that we had in March to see how many of our teams could reach that 50/50 balance and representation. And 70% of our teams who took part managed to reach 50% women, compared to a third when they first joined the project. And it wasn't the first time for doing that only here at the BBC, but it was the first time doing it across more than 100 organisations in 26 countries. And they did really well as well, with half of them reaching 50% women representation. We've taken what we've learned from that gender side of things to look at how we can improve representation for disability and ethnicity now. And that's something we're going to be reporting on in the future. all of this feeds into what we're going to be talking about in this session, and that's about overall representation, because everything is what we call intersectional. Everything has an impact on something else, and so hopefully through this conversation we'll hear a bit more about how 50/50 is supporting young voices too.
Okay, fab. Let's bring in the rest of the panel. Anthony, Neela, are you there? Come in, cameras on, mics on.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, introduce yourself, guys.
Neela, you go first.
Okay, so hi, I'm Nyla Butt. I have just started a new role at Channel 4 as the Creative Diversity Lead for the Nations and Regions. It's a new role as the Creative Diversity team expanded at Channel 4. I was at the BBC very recently for 20 odd years, so I know my colleagues, Rob, Nina, Shanice, everybody, and Josie, of course, as well. So I have lots of experience from the BBC, and I'm day 4 into this role, so be gentle with me. Well, not really. You can ask me some difficult questions as well. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to you all.
Hi, and my name is Anthony Brown. I'm the digital production lead at BBC Scotland, and I was one of the creators of BBC The Social, which is a project that we do in Scotland that's been going for 5 years now, with a specific aim of trying to engage young people, try and empower and enable young people to make content for the BBC, commissioning on a daily basis young people to have a voice, and particularly going out into underserved communities, people that feel like they don't get to hear themselves on the media. We go out and try and get them to say whatever they want to say and make it in a way that they can develop skills along the way and they can be a voice for their community.
Yeah, thanks. So as you guys can see, we've got a great panel, and Nina, Anthony and Nyla are going to be answering your questions over the next 30 minutes or so. So if you do have a question, please use the Q&A button on Zoom, and you can ask it anonymously, but if you do leave your name, we'll try and bring you in live. You won't be on the camera, so don't worry, but you can ask your question in person, so be prepared. And we have a couple of questions that have been sent in already, so I want to put those to the panel first. Let's go in the same order, maybe, of answering this first question. How important are diverse young voices in our content, and what progress do you think has been made to encourage a wider range of younger voices?
Thank you. I don't know if going first is always poison chalice, right? But anyway, no, that's great. I mean, one of the things that both actually Nyla and my roles are around is about kind of looking at content that we're creating and working out how we can make it more reflective of the society around us. And of course, that includes young voices as well. We at the BBC have a remit as well to make sure that we're informing, educating and entertaining everyone. So we need to be making sure we're upping our game in terms of that as well. So we do have initiatives that we are bringing in. Over COVID, of course, we launched one of the biggest education programs of all time to help support young people during that period. But what also happened as a result of that is that we were having more connections, more opportunity to hear voices, and that was really important. And I'm going to throw now to Anthony, because he's a perfect example of what happened as a result of that through the programs that he does.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So even in my department, we go out and engage. We've got BBC Lab, and we go out into schools and teach young people how to capture, how to use whatever things they can get their hands on to tell stories. If they've got a camera or video phone, we try and teach those skills. But the social was a project that was specifically created to try and encourage young people. I think it's vital that young people's voices are heard. I think the BBC has an aim of being universal for everyone, and young people are an important part of our society, and it's absolutely crucial that we give them a voice. I think there's lots of initiatives going on across the BBC. As I mentioned in the introduction, The Social is one that we particularly have concentrating on in Scotland, and that is just on a daily basis we commission young people to have a voice and to tell their own story. And through that, we share that content on BBC website, but we also share it through social media platforms. with an aim of developing people to be able to tell their story, but not just their story, because lots of people come to us with particular issues that they want to talk about, but then we try and develop them on to talk about other things. So we don't want people to just be pigeonholed into whatever issue that they come to us initially. And then what we do is we give them the skills to be able to tell other stories and different stories and find stories of other young people that they want to tell. And we've been lucky enough to be able to develop lots of people through to then go on to make television shows, to be guests on the news programs, to be on Radio 4 podcasts, to be in a number of places, because the skills that we give them and we develop through allow them to be ready for when all these other opportunities come. And a lot of the time, different parts of the BBC will come to us and say, oh, we're really interested in somebody that's passionate about this subject, or somebody who's got experience of this, and then we can give them a list of people. So not only do we create for our platform, we can create for the whole of the BBC. And that, yeah, as I said, I think it's crucial that we continue to do that.
Yeah, following on from that, I would say, in direct answer to the question, is that I don't think we're there yet. I don't think that I think it's got a lot better in terms of young voices and young people kind of being portrayed or being represented, or actually part of the on-screen content as well. I think that with my role is slightly different from Anthony's and Nina's, because Channel 4 doesn't make any of its programs. We are absolutely reliant on production houses, external companies that make all of our content. So the really important part and what our team does is work very closely with commissioners. So we embed, if you like, certain strategies and certain kind of values and principles with the commissioners. So they have to ensure that the people who are going to make the content are representative, and if the content is about particularly young people, you have to ensure that those voices and those people who are making those programs are also part of the production houses that are going to make that content as well, because that's how it's going to be authentic. So it's slightly different from the BBC, which I learned in the last 4 days very quickly. But it's challenging, and I think that the commissioner role for Channel 4 is really, really important. And I think on the whole, they get a lot of things right, but I think there's always room for improvement, I would say.
Okay, well, I want to bring the conversation onto representation now. So if anyone on the call has a question about, how you see yourself on screen, how you feel you're being portrayed on screen, now is your time to get those questions in the Q&A. We had a lot of young people sending questions and comments specifically about this, all different types of representation and how they see themselves. So we have a question from Ollie, who's 16, from Southeast London. But before we get to his question, he sent it in on a video. I just wanted to read out some comments from some other young people, so you can see how much of an issue for them this is. So some students from Connaught School have said that they think much of the mainstream media their portrayal of young people is stereotyped, and they want a more diverse range of teenagers in terms of casting, so that a more diverse range of teenagers and viewers can relate to someone on screen. Most of the time they whitewash characters unknowingly, despite them being from ethnic minorities. Another comment said that a lot of media tends to represent our generation as unruly or frame us in a bad way. So let's get to Ollie's question and see what you guys have to say.
I just feel like the media need to understand the outcome that their articles or their shows have on us as young people, because people really do judge us a lot. We get a lot of prejudice. Do you ever talk to the young people? Do you ever have any young writers or young people who want to get into writing and invite them down and say, you know what, we need a storyline for this show, and you're a young person, you know what goes on, how about you try write or something, or give our writers ideas to write about? Because a lot of the things that I see in the media portraying young people, from the acting to the storylines, it's a very big disconnect.
I'm happy to start with that, Shanice, if you like. So you know, I think it's a really valid point, and I think that, again, I don't think we've quite got there yet. And I think there's you know, we have outreach work. We have to ensure, you know, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is that if you are a commissioner or a leader, in terms of making editorial decisions, you know, it's our job to know what various groups and especially young people, you know, what the spaces that they're living in, the spaces that they're engaging in and interacting in. It's our responsibility to be across those things, is the first thing that I would say. So I think that's really important. Channel 4 have just launched, just before I came, the Black to Front initiative, which is a day of programmes later on this year, which is going to be totally on screen and off screen, made by Black producers, you know, but made by the Black community. And it was a call out for all of the editorial roles, all of the creative roles, which we've just done, and we've had an absolutely phenomenal response to that. We will soon be extending that as well to other roles, but that is one of the ways that we are, you know, in terms of authenticity. So they will decide on the stories, they will decide on the content. I think I can say that there are new commissions. Sorry if I can't, Channel 4, but there might be some new commissions as well. But I think it's really important that it's not just that day. And what we are really working on is the legacy. So we want to have the kind of career path. I think Anthony touched on it about in the BBC. It's easy because they're so big and you can kind of move people around. But for us, it's really important that once we've got these young people or new creatives in, that we have a legacy and we have a career path really for them as well. So that's one of the initiatives that we're doing here at Channel 4.
Yeah, I would agree that it's crucial to get young people involved very early on. In fact, we and again, I think Nyla's right, that we do a lot, but we can always do more. And one of the things that we do at the moment is at least once a month we go out and meet face to face with groups of young people. We do it all across all across Scotland, right up into the islands. And obviously, with the last year been lots of Zoom calls and things, it's been really nice to be able to do it more regularly rather than having to kind of go on long journeys. What we can actually do is do it more regularly and get more people involved. And that's been brilliant for the team to be able to meet up with these young people. In fact, like from the very outset, that's how we started the social. We invited 50 young people in and we sat with them for hours over about maybe about an 8-week period. 3 of us from the BBC invited them in every week, and we sat for hours and just talked about what they liked, what they didn't like. A lot of what they liked or what they didn't like was they didn't even know what we were doing. And so it was like, well, what else are you doing? Why don't you like it? And we built the social model completely in conjunction with young people, because we said, well, if the BBC were trying to do stuff in this area, what should we be doing? And I remember, I think it was week 4 or 5, we went away and we wrote up a plan of what we think it could be like. Week 6, we stood in front of them and saying, what do you think about this? And they were like, nah, don't like that. And we're like, okay, let's go again. And that was fine, because we weren't there to try and impose something. We were there to listen. And I think that's a really important part. It's okay going out and meeting with people, but you actually need to listen to them, and you need to then put into action what they say instead of just kind of paying lip service and being out and being a face. We try our best to implement everything, and we try to be an open door to invite people in. So sometimes we get people coming to us and saying, well, that's all well and good, that person made that piece of content, but I don't agree with them. Why do you never represent this view? And we say, well, you can do it tomorrow if you want. It's an open policy. We commission every day. So if you don't agree, let's hear it then.
It's fantastic what you do at Social, and it's something actually the virtual in-persons, as we call them now, don't we, has started to spring up quite a lot across BBC content, where we're asking audience members to come and talk to our content makers so that they can get a real hands-on experience of, you know, people who think differently from them. And I think that's really, really important. And young people are really quite crucial to that. We have a weekly kind of pulse survey, we call it in the BBC, where we kind of test across the UK the opinions of young people who are using BBC services. And that gets fed back to all our content makers every week. So they're engaging in that sense, but there is nothing that can replace actually speaking to people and getting people's actual authentic opinion, because there's only so much you can do in a survey, isn't there, at the end of the day. And so I think one of the things that we really need to be doing is looking at the workforce that we have in the first place, because if we don't have enough diversity of voice within that workforce, then the characters aren't going to be authentic. So as Ollie was saying, you know, seeing yourselves being represented, how can you do that if you don't really know who that person is in the first place? And I think there was a comment about that that you mentioned beforehand as well, Shanice. So I think, you know, everything that we need to do has to be, you know, do I think differently to who I'm trying to represent? And if I can only see it through one prism, then I need to go and ask someone. I need to go and find out more information about who I'm trying to characterize, who I'm trying to give the opinions of. And that can only be done by going out there and actually meeting people face to face. And so, yeah, we're doing a lot more of that than we've ever done, I think. And COVID actually bizarrely has made it easier because of the fact that we've removed that barrier of having to be with people. So forget the travel. Now, look how quickly and easily, you know, 100 people can be on a call together. That's something that hopefully we'll be taking forward way beyond COVID.
Can I just add in something else here before we move on? Is we also need to accept that young people are very, very different as well. I think a lot of the conversations we talk about young people as if they're all the same. And if you are a young person in an inner city, or you're a young person in a rural town or in the middle of the countryside, life is very different. Or if you're a young person at 18 and a young person at 29, life is very different. And everyone has their own challenges, whatever they might be, and they can completely change your perception and the way that you receive everything. So I think meeting people, like Nina said, that's the way that you can actually get to understand all the various people that make up young people. And we don't talk about other groups in this big homogenous way. So I think that's something that we just need to be careful we don't fall into that trap.
And one tiny thing that I'm going to quickly add to that is the regional stuff. How somebody who is in London, an 18-year-old in London, is very different to an 18-year-old in Bradford. So that again is part of my role, which I'll talk about.
Nyla, I'm going to bring you in on it right now, actually, because that was next. Yes. I want to bring the conversation onto regional representation. And actually, we do have somebody, I know that Shannon is around. We're going to queue her up to ask her question in a second. But yeah, regional representation is massively important to young people. We had so many different questions and comments come in on that. We had people from Scotland, Wales, Ireland, different parts of the UK, different parts of England, and they all, you know, made different comments specifically about their regions. In fact, so Millie was talking about, she said, is it possible for broadcasters to increase coverage from South Wales, because content now is often quite outdated and it leads to a lack of cultural awareness. We had Fran from the Midlands, who basically was saying that most young people think that the media is about being in a big city, but is it really? And Shannon, we'll bring you in now, because I know that you have a question about regional representation too.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, panel. Thank you so much for joining the session today. I actually used to work with the lovely Anthony not so long ago. I'm from a working class town in the northeast of England. I'm from South Shields, if anyone knows it. It's where all the little mixed girls are from. And my community, I've worked as a journalist in the area, and my community really feel misrepresented in the media at times. And I know there's an audience issue for most broadcasters with the northeast as a region. How do you think we can make sure that we portray northern and working class audiences authentically and accurately on screen? And what steps need to be taken to change this perception that this community has, and I'm sure many other communities up and down the UK? yeah, again, there's assumptions that have been made. Is it not enough commissioning power? Is it not enough resources? Are there too few talent development pipelines? Not enough outreach? Would love to hear your opinions.
I can take I mean, Shannon, you've hit the nail on the head with all of those solutions, you know, commissioners, outreach, all of that. My role has been created at Channel 4. So just to give you a little quick snippet, so Channel 4's Future Falls strategy, is that 50% of its programmes in the next 3 years, I think it is, will be made outside of London. And my role, my role is a new role, which is the Nations and Regions Creative Diversity Lead. That is going to be part of my job, to work with commissioners to ensure that they're, like I said earlier about their production houses, are, you know, we're not working, you know, we don't just, so 50% of our programmes have to be made by production houses outside of London. That is also part of the content that we make as well, what we commission. So you're absolutely spot on. You know, this is something that is, you know, from a commissioner point of view, absolutely embedded in the decisions that they make in what they commission. I think that if you look at the kind of bases now that Channel 4 has, my job is actually based in Leeds. I live in Birmingham, but my job will be based in Leeds. We already have presence in Bristol, presence in Glasgow, you know, and it's not just a presence, it's where programmes are commissioned and made. So that commitment definitely is there. I think we're nowhere near getting it right or getting it perfect, but we are definitely onto the right steps, and that is my job. So I will be banging on doors and knocking on, and I'm in those commissioning meetings and flying the flag for the nation and nations as well. You know, as Anthony said, you know, Scotland is a really big place where, you know, even in Scotland, the diversity of Scotland or Wales or Ireland and Northern Ireland, we have to be, you know, we have to be savvy, and we have to be across those differences, the authenticity of it, you know, the differences that those voices make, because at the end of the day, you know, it's our job to be representative of all of the nations and regions. So hopefully, if you talk to me in a year's time, it might be a little bit different.
That's great.
Yeah, that's something that we hear a lot. Like we hear a lot of people saying that in the mainstream media, or what they call the mainstream media, you only ever hear a Scottish person if they're either like the drug addict or the alcoholic, or they own a big country estate and they're shooting deer in Outlander world. And I think that doesn't connect with young people, because young people in Scotland just don't recognise any of those stereotypes, and they think of Scotland as a young, diverse, creative place with lots of things going on, and they're not seeing that coming through. I had a conversation with a young person quite early on where they were just consuming everything on YouTube, and what they could tell me was like the difference between like a Brooklyn accent and a Queen's accent, but they couldn't tell me the difference between different cities in Scotland. So it's a real challenge to kind of, how do we keep our young people connected with their own countries and their own other parts of their own country? And accents is a really important part of it. One of the things that comes through there is on the social and on BBC Scotland social media, people in Scotland talk slightly differently, and we use different words. The Scots language is a recognised language in Scotland. And early on, I kind of started our team subtitling in Scots. So, and people would comment going, why are you using slang? The BBC shouldn't be promoting slang. And saying, well, actually, this is Scots language and it's a recognised dialect, and it's recognised by the EU. And that is something that really connects, because if you are on the BBC talking in your normal voice and then somebody else is converting that into proper English, and the subtitles, you're just like, and we get people saying, oh, look, there's the BBC subtitling Scottish people because we don't understand. Well, we kind of push back on that, obviously, saying like, it's accessibility reasons. It gives people the ability to, if they can't hear what's happening, they can follow the subtitles. But it also is a part of representation. It's a part of trying to authentically represent what people are saying, so that it can connect with more people.
Yeah, I think authentic portrayal is absolutely crucial to, I think, you know, this is going to be a theme that we're going to be saying, I think, throughout this session, but authentic portrayal is crucial. And especially when you're thinking about your particular question as well around socioeconomic diversity, you know, that's a real kind of drive area for us across the BBC at the moment, because we do realise and recognise that for people from socioeconomic diverse backgrounds, that we're not representing you well enough at the moment, and so we do really need to do some hard work to make sure that we are improving that. Part of that is, as Nyla was talking about, that they're doing at Channel 4 and commissioning across the regions and nations. So we're following very similar routes and mechanisms as well, with our Director General just a couple of weeks ago announcing across the UK and how we're moving our staff across the nations and regions to try and make sure that we are using local talent and local skills so that we can kind of get those authentic voices into our organizations, into our businesses, so that, you know, our content is starting to represent and reflect the areas that we all live in. And I think that's going to be a really important thing. It's going to change a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the language that we're using, in terms of the feel and tone that comes across in the content that we're making. And we know from 50/50 that as soon as you are increasing representation and reflecting people in your particular content, they're more likely to connect with it, more likely to consume it. And that's what we've seen with women's representation, with 58% more women 16 to 34 now consuming BBC online content as a result of increased women representation. So we need to do the same thing for socioeconomic diversity, for ethnicity, for disability, and all other areas that are underrepresented as well.
Definitely. Thank you all. Can I very quickly just wanted to add as well, Shannon, that, you know, it's as our public service responsibility, public service broadcasters, it's also an industry responsibility. We have to create the opportunities across the UK, outside of London especially, to ensure that those industry, the creative industry, can thrive in those areas. So it's actually a public service broadcaster responsibility for both the BBC and Channel 4 to ensure that we are participating in ensuring that industry can thrive within those areas as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I wouldn't have applied for the job I got if I hadn't seen Steph McGovern on the TV. So the accent point that Anthony made is spot on.
And I'm part of the RAISE network, which is the BBC's internal network for kind of people from working class backgrounds. And I've done sessions all across the BBC with different teams, just trying to kind of make sure that working class representation and working class voices are in their thoughts when they're planning their content and planning what's going to be going on the television and the radio. It's important to have these conversations continually, just to keep reaffirming, as well as all the kind of projects and things that we have to bring more working class representation into our staff base.
But I think that's so crucial, that we as people in our organisations and businesses need to talk up. We need to speak up. We have our own perspectives and our own viewpoints. And if we're not saying what they are, then we do end up going down that one prism that doesn't connect with anyone. And so I think what BBC Raised has been doing across the BBC has been fantastic. Also, they get some really awesome guests, by the way. Like, you know, Vicky McClure from Line of Duty was on the other day, which was amazing. But apart from the stardom part of it, you know, it was fantastic because she really gave a different perspective. And for people who have not experienced that perspective, you learn so much, and then you can take that away and you can use that to make sure that you're enriching your content as you move forward.
Fab. I'm moving you guys on now because we're going to run out of time otherwise. Sticking with the theme of representation, I want to just move the conversation on to, let's talk about representation of people with disabilities on and off screen. We had, again, loads of questions and comments in about that. Dylan17, and he emailed in a question, but also I want to come to his comment first. He said, it matters a lot for young people to be heard and our lives to be reflected to help us and teach each other about different disabilities. I am disabled and I love talking to people because I love to show people how I see the world. And again, there was other comments about how, for example, why is it that when a conversation is brought up about disability, often you'll see people who are non-disabled having these conversations, and why is that? But moving on to Dylan's question, he said, relating to it, why are disabled people ignored so much, and not many of them being on TV programs, especially young disabled people?
I can start with that if you like again. So again, as part of the creative diversity team here at Channel 4, we have a lead, a disability lead, who is also part of the new team that we have here, because I absolutely think that it's an area that we just have not got right. I think that there is quite rightly now a climate where you can talk about having various disabilities and people with disabilities being represented, not just on, it's the on screen, but it's also, again, the same principles apply about authenticity from people who are making the content as well. And I think it's an area that has just in terms of started to become absolutely prominent and at the forefront of all of the inclusion, representation, portrayal work. And it's, we had a meeting this morning about just the definitions around various disabilities and, and how you talk. So language and tone is really, really important as well. And I think, that it's one of the areas in terms of, like I said, in the representation and inclusion world that we absolutely have to start working on. And like I said, we've now got a lead and expertise, absolutely, who will hopefully help us along those places, help us get it right, frankly.
No. Oh, go on. Go on, Anthony.
I was just going to say that what we need to do as well is we've got a role to be open and to be honest and to be transparent with people, because I remember having conversations with young people that have come in and said, I want to make content for the social, and we said, right, so what are you into? What do you want to talk about? And they said, yeah, I want to do something about being autistic. And they're saying, okay, what else are you into? And they're like, well, I could do thing about I love films, so I could do thing about being autistic and going to the movies. And I was like, but you could just do a bit about films. You don't need to be the autistic person. Like, we want to understand your point of view, and we kind of purposely talk about commissioning people rather than commissioning bits of content, because we want to hear from that person about, and if they want to talk about an issue, then that's great, because lots of issues aren't getting enough time. But then we say, right, what else is going on in your life? Because everyone's a multi-dimensional person with lots of things going on, and we don't want to just hear people. Like, the disabled person only ever gets on air when it's a disability issue. Disabled people also have housing problems and problems with or happiness around things. It doesn't always have to be a problem even, can you imagine? And so that's where we need to, when we engage with people, we need to say, we're not just here to talk about this particular thing. That's on us to open the door and not just say, right, we're only ever speaking to you on this issue.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do in 50/50. So we, as I mentioned at the top, we've moved the core principles not only to monitor for women's representation, but also for disability and ethnicity. And the whole point is that we're trying to make voices every day. So it doesn't matter who you are. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your expertise. And what we're trying to do through monitoring is essentially get people to understand whether they're giving everyone the opportunity of voice, everyone the opportunity to have their say. And what's been really interesting since we've started looking at disability is that people didn't realize until they started monitoring that they weren't actually representing disabled voices on their content. There were, and I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise, but for some of the pilot teams in their first month, they had zero representation. That's changed, fortunately, for those particular teams that I'm thinking about. They're now moving the dial, but they were absolutely surprised to know that they had no representation at all. And that's the real important thing for us, is that, you know, now that we're starting to understand what we are doing, we can make the change, and we can make sure that we're representing voices better. And that really fits in with Anthony's kind of point there, that who we are should essentially be almost incidental to what we're trying to portray and give that voice and that story to. But one of the other things that we've been doing through 50/50 is we've been working with the Media Trust on a project called Reframing Disability, which BBC Social has been part of course. And what we've been doing with that is we've been actually training our journalists and teaching them about kind of the barriers that they may be putting up to stop disabled voices coming on to talk about everyday issues. And one of the things that Anthony mentioned there about, you know, only having disabled people on to talk about disabled issues, that has been something that we've been trying to drive home and say, look, forget that. What are the other things? You know, there are economists, there are architects, there are musicians out there. Use them for what they're good at, what their experiences and expertise are. And that's something that we're slowly hopefully getting the message spread across the BBC and beyond through the Media Trust. And the other thing that we've been doing as well is we've been going out and saying, put yourself forward. You're the experts. We don't know where you are unless you come forward and tell us about yourselves. And so that's another part of the project. And we ask people to put themselves forward. And we have, for the BBC specifically, a New Voices database, which you can access on bbc.com/50/50, and sign up if you're an expert in any particular area, because at the end of the day, we're looking for experts across the board, and we don't care what your representational background is. You just need to be an expert in that particular area and field. And I think that's really what's going to start changing the mindset. The other thing that we found, sorry, I have so many different points to make on this one. The other thing that we found is that since moving into this type of field, i.e. kind of virtual world, it's actually removed a lot of the barriers for getting people on who perhaps we wouldn't have had on before, because you don't have to be in a studio, you don't need to have an ISDN line to be on radio, and that's just widened the pool, and that has been really beneficial in our work to try and increase disabled people representation. Right, I'm going to stop now because Shanice.
I'm just going to emphasize Nina's point. Sorry, Shanice, but absolutely, you know, one of the positives of the pandemic is that accessibility and getting those different voices regionally, but also for people with disabilities, is absolutely, and it's something that we're actually going to embed into going forward ways of working that we're doing at Channel 4. You know, we're going to stay with it because actually it absolutely helps enhance that wider pool of representation.
Can I add one last thing?
Go on, Anthony, because you're going to anyway.
Basically, on Nina's point about making yourself known and having a voice, because that's really crucial, especially when it comes to unseen disabilities, because it can be difficult to be able to find people. So please do make yourself heard.
Well, speaking of making yourself heard, I actually want to bring in Alex, who's 18 from Warwickshire. She was diagnosed with autism in 2019 and has found that portrayals of autism on mainstream TV to be incredibly limited. And Alex, I just want to bring you in on the conversation, basically, you know, talk to these guys about your frustrations and, you know, why it's so important to you and other people in the community. Alex, are you there? Unmute yourself. Oh no. Can you hear me okay? Are we able to unmute Alex? Let me see.
Unfortunately, I can't unmute Alex from this end. So Alex, if you are there, if you can unmute for us, otherwise, Shanice, I think you're going to have to read his questions and comments. No worries.
Well, what we can do, Alex, if you can't...
I can give a response about autism, because I did a bit of research before we came on. It's part of my research. So in Hollyoaks, if you're familiar with Hollyoaks, Alex, there was, and this was before my time, but there is a character on there, Brooke, played by somebody called Ty, and in terms of casting for that character, Channel 4 went over, they absolutely made sure that the casting process was really important to get authentic, authenticity in terms of who was going to play it. And the way we got Ty was that we had worked with Access All Areas, which was helping in terms of making sure that we were targeting the right people, sending out also pictures of the building that they were going to eventually come and audition in sending out photos of the people who were going to be on the panel so that they were familiarising themselves with the people. So it wasn't going to be a surprise and they were familiar with the people who they were going to engage in. There was a casting pack which was put together with Access All Areas. And I thought this was brilliant, that there were they saw 250 people for the audition because they felt that the effort that people had gone to actually apply, they just made sure that they saw a bigger number of people, but then also it was an opportunity to hear their experiences. Obviously it was going to be one character, but it was an opportunity to hear their experiences. It was an opportunity to kind of almost dictate the storylines a little bit as well. They also fed into some of the storylines as well. And also the casting team and the production teams had special training in terms of making sure that they were facilitating in the correct way. So that's just a little plug for how Channel 4 has done some work on getting an autistic character into their main programmes.
Thanks, Nyla, and thanks so much, Alex, for submitting the question and your comment. I know they've dropped off now, but it was very valued to get Nyla's input on that and see what Channel 4 are doing. Maybe the BBC can come in and do something as well. But we're going to move the conversation on slightly, and we've got a video sent in by Hannah, who's 17 from Edinburgh, and she has a question around ethnicity.
Hey everyone, I'm Hannah, I'm from Edinburgh, Scotland. My question to the panel today is, what are you going to do to improve the representation of minorities without it seeming tokenistic and making sure the representation is authentic? Thank you.
And also just quickly reflecting that we also had another comment and question in the Q&A, which was very, very similar from Sophie. So thank you for submitting that.
So I'll go first. That's one. I would say that what we are trying to do in Scotland is nobody can be more authentic than the person themselves. So what we can try and do is empower people and enable them to be able to have a voice. Once we can build up their skills, then when other opportunities come along, we can then signpost through and say, look, if you're needing someone on this issue, then this person has got lived experience of that. They can represent that those issues better than anyone because it's them and it's their life. So that's a sort of very direct way that we would be doing that in Scotland.
I'm gonna take it bigger. I'm gonna take it to the bigger picture for the UK. And across the BBC, we have a workforce representation of 50-20-12, which is 50% gender, 20% ethnicity, and 12% disabled representation. And we also reflect that into our content as well at a UK level. And then what we do is we ask each of our different regions and local radio stations to then look at their own population and make sure that their content is reflecting that particular population. And this goes back to this idea that we must be making content that is reflective of the society around us. And so through that, we'd hope to see an increase in ethnic minority representation in the places where it is needed. So for example, when we were doing work for how we work out the metrics for 50-50, because again, we're using ethnicity monitoring, 50-50 monitoring to monitor ethnicity, we looked at places like London, for example, and 20% would be way too low because the metropolitan area is 50%, half of the population is from an ethnic minority background. So for BBC London, that's their target. Whereas when you look to the east of England, you look to Norwich, they're looking at more 3-4%. So then you're tailoring it to the needs of that particular audience, that particular content, as to what that representation should look like. and on a even bigger scale than the UK. For our TV commissioners and for our radio commissioners, we've got £112 million pot, so £100 million for TV, 12 million for radio, which is existing commissioning money that is for diverse commissioning specifically. So we're looking for content that will be representative of a particular underrepresented group. And again, that is for disability, ethnicity and socioeconomic diversity. And I know, Nyla, you'll pick me up on that one for what you're doing at Channel 4.
Yeah, well, I talked about Black to Front earlier on in the conversation, but what I wanted to just give an example of was, so the race report that came out last week or the week before, I can't remember. I just found that in terms, this is just a bit of a positive, my own observation, was that I thought that was covered by all news outlets quite well. And I think that if you look at the narrative, and I was talking to somebody about this, and I'll keep it brief, Shanice, but I think it's important to talk about a positive as well, because I think that if you look at the way that story initially came out in the morning, which was through the government almost kind of press office and mouthpiece, which was that, oh, we're a great nation, and you know, there are some problems, but we're okay and we're doing well. But actually, I think that there was enough momentum and comfort, if you like, around whether it was Twitter or whether it was just enough people to make a noise and say, well, actually, and challenge the government to say, well, actually, we don't agree with that. And we don't think that that's quite right. And we think you're putting a spin on it. But then when you look at the coverage, and this is an overall coverage on Channel 4, on the BBC and on ITV, by the afternoon, that whole narrative had changed. And the reason it had changed is because they got the right people, the right reporters to cover that story. So you had Adina Campbell's piece on the BBC, which was brilliant. You had Aisha Tull on Channel 4, absolutely brilliant. She went to Brixton, which is where Tony Sewell is from, to actually hear from the people who were, you know, from his patch. And then, of course, Shihab Khan from ITN on ITV. And the reason I think that narrative changed by the afternoon and the evening was because we had authentic reporters and, you know, the right people doing that story. And I was really pleased. And I think that, yes, it's still an onward growing journey, but we, you know, you can see how far we've come, because that could have turned into something quite different. And I really wanted to make that point, because I think it was really important to know that that's where authentic reporting and having the right people doing the content and doing the story you get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else want to come in just before we move on? No. Excellent.
I think we're going to get told off if we did that, right?
Yeah. Well, this time I thought I'd ask just in case. Okay, so I want to bring in a question/comment from Ellis, who's 15 from East London, and essentially, in the media, sexuality is often seen as a taboo subject, but as a generation that is known for being forward and understanding the LGBTQ+ community, I think the representation in the media should also increase, and that the characters should not just be based around their sexuality or gender, but how their personality and the story are entwined. So how will you improve more inclusive storylines, not making the characters' personality their sexuality and just being part of them?
I'm just very quickly going to say, Commissioner. I think it's about how stories are commissioned. It's about understanding the whole area around sexuality and gender. It's about, because there's so, you know, it's not like there isn't, you see, I think that almost 5 years ago, a lot of the things that we've talked about, you know, the resources, the conversations, a lot of these things were just not out there. There was no comfort in it. I think social media and other media platforms have made it so much easier to talk about these things. And I think there's absolutely no excuse in terms of getting it wrong or not being representative of it. So I would say absolutely embed in people who are commissioning, certainly for Channel 4, it's about the commissioners and about understanding and ensuring. And I think we do an okay job, actually. We're still not in the place that we want to be. And I think that will take time and it's an evolving process. But absolutely, it's about, you know, the stories that you're commissioning and the people who are making it.
I agree, absolutely. It's about who's in the room, isn't it? So, you know, if you're not hearing the voices, you're not going to get that experience through it. And it comes back down to us all speaking up. If we have a particular position or point of view, but I mean, I used to be this person, so I can't really say much about it. It's taken me a long time to be able to do this and speak about how I feel about things. But, you know, to be brave, to speak up when you're in those commissioning meetings, when you are trying to create content, and go and talk to Anthony because he'll help you. It's the other thing I'll say.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just going to say, like, having open, honest conversations about these things is the really important part. So and using the tools that we have available to us. So we made a podcast series for Radio 4 called Tricky. And in one of the episodes, we just had 4 young people talking about pronouns and just talking about why it's important to them, and just kind of myth busting and just talking about it, saying everyone gets all worked up about these pronouns, but really, like, is it that difficult to use this word? And just hopefully some people that listened to that have thought, whoa, I'd never really thought of it like that before. And it wasn't. A lot of the conversation sometimes online gets a bit heated and people start and things get polarized. And the whole premise of that podcast is young people coming together to talk about tricky subjects, but just talking face to face, and you get a level of discussion which really opens up things and hopefully opens up people's minds to think like this isn't anything strange or taboo, it's just life.
I want to talk about opportunities and advice now, because you've all talked about how important it is that young people are given opportunities to be able to be their authentic selves. So, you know, let's put your money where your mouth is. Let's talk about opportunities, advice, what's out there for young people. So Dean from High Wycombe is 17. He sent us in a question, but also Hannah, who's 19 from Bolton, she sent in a very similar question, just asking about, you know, what can she do? So let's go to Dean first.
Hello, my name's Dean. I'm 17 years old from High Wycombe. I'm currently studying media at college and plan to go to university in September to study sports journalism. My question for you guys is, what can young people like me between the ages of 16 and 19 do more to be involved in media and be a part of different programs and behind the scene broadcasting and things like that?
I'd just quickly also like to add to this question. Can we specifically also maybe talk about some opportunities for the disabled community as well? There might be different opportunities, they might be the same, but yeah, let's bring those in as well.
I'll say BBC The Social commissions all the time. We're constantly looking. At the moment, we're just based in Scotland. So if you are based in Scotland or got a connection to Scotland, then please do get in touch with us. You can find out bbc.co.uk/The Social. I think the apprenticeship scheme that the BBC runs is an amazing way to get involved in the BBC. But, and I'm sure other people are going to talk about Young Reporter and all of that, and so I'll leave that. But the other thing I would say is one of the really important things to do is just do it. Get involved, start making stuff today, start making stuff tomorrow, and things. If you start from scratch, it might be a little bit rubbish today. Tomorrow, it will be a tiny little bit less rubbish. The day after, it will just, and you will. That's a huge thing of just doing it. If you want to be a sports commentator, start commentating while you're watching the game. If you want to be a filmmaker, pick up your phone and start filming stuff. That's the real crucial bit. And then obviously explore other opportunities. Go onto the BBC Careers website, sign up for alerts for the things that you're interested in. And then when those opportunities come along, you'll have a body of stuff that you can talk about. You'll show that you're passionate about it. And that goes a long way for people.
You kind of stolen my answers, but I'm going to say them again. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I was a journalist. Well, I still am a journalist, and I was really passionate about getting into the media from a very young age. 8 actually officially. But my first ever piece that I wrote was for my school magazine about aliens, and that was at 12. And then from there, I was looking at kind of what can I do, how can I move forward, and it was kind of anything, any type of work experience that I could get, local newspapers. I mean, I was editor of like the school magazine, the university magazine. I helped at hospital radio and volunteered there so I could get radio experience. You know, I started a blog, anything and everything that can evidence your passion around what you're trying to do. Is how you will be able to go for those apprenticeships. There's going to be 1,000 available across the UK for the BBC. And so there's lots of different opportunities, and you don't have to go to university. They are at different levels of entry as well. So, you know, think about kind of what you want to do as well. Do you want to go down the university route in the first place? Because there are ways and means of getting into the industry in different ways. And I think that's really important as well, because it brings in the authenticity when we're talking about that representation point, because if we have all different experiences as we come into the business, then we're more likely to be able to enrich our storytelling because of our different viewpoints. And there are tons of jobs out there across it. So, but it's finding what you're passionate about and what you really feel that you can be dedicated around, really, I think.
Oh, unmute myself. So just a little anecdote, just a little bit of things. So I started about 20 odd years ago volunteering, so work experience for free, answering the phones at Radio WM, which is the local radio station in Birmingham. And before I left the BBC, I was asked to run that radio station. You know, so it took me 20 odd years, but I went all the way from, you know, that's where I started, and I was really happy not to leave. When I left the BBC, it was where I'd started, but it was running that radio station. But had I not gone in and answered the phones for free for them, that was where my journey started. So I would say, as Nina says, work experience is really important. I think Anthony touched on, there is a plethora of how you can make content now. You can put it onto so many social platforms to raise your profile, to give you the experiences. You don't have to be in a broadcaster or in a company now. You can just do it for yourself, as Anthony said, and you will get the practice of what a film looks like, what a bit of audio sounds like, what a podcast sounds like, I would say. And just a couple of plugs for Channel 4. So we've had the Black to Front already, that initiative that was for the creative side. We are looking at doing the technical and crafts side as well, coming up in the next few weeks. And there's also, if you're interested in journalism, Channel 4's MA in investigative journalism is fantastic. It's run in Leicester, but you can get full funding, full bursaries for that. And I know that the closing date is not until August this year, but so if you want more information about those two opportunities, Shanice, I'm more than happy to share those if you want afterwards as well. But they're two great initiatives that we run as well. And finally, I think it's just about you know, knowing that, you know, sometimes what happens is that you start thinking that you want to do one thing. Don't close yourself off to opportunities, and don't close yourself off to that, I just want to work in radio, or unless you're really, really passionate, that's what you want to do. Because I've certainly been very blessed in my career, where I've managed to work in radio, in telly, in documentaries, in so many different areas. And actually, you know, I don't think that I would have had the job that I have today had I not worked in so many different genres as well. So don't close yourself off just to one bit that you think that you like or you're an expert at. Actually broaden it as much as you can, I would say.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I've worked across all different bits of the industry, from print, radio, TV, online, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And I never thought I'd end up in TV in the end, I have to admit. So when I started, there is a little remiss on our part, which is obviously one of the best ways that you can get experience is through Young Reporter. And there is a wealth of resource and knowledge through Young Reporter. There's a really fantastic game called iReporter, which I love, which shows you a little bit of an experience around what it's like to be in a newsroom, for example. But there are, I mean, Shanice can talk better than I can about this, but so I'm gonna actually bring you in here, Shanice. Role reversal.
I love this. Yeah, so essentially, Young Reporter, we work with young people across the UK to make your authentic stories. It's under 18s, but we normally do 11 to 18, so secondary school, college age, and youth organisations. We actually run a big competition every year where young people from across the UK send in their story ideas, and we whittle them down, and we have editors and talent, which we call them talent, but it's presenters from across the BBC. Judging your stories, and then those winners are broadcast. But likewise, if there's any other ideas that you have throughout the year, then send them to us, because we're always looking for some. And we don't just make stories for our platforms, we make stories pan BBC. So if there's young people that have an idea, it's not quite a story, but it's a good idea, then we can help you work with different departments who could make that into a fully fledged idea. So I'd say in a nutshell, that's kind of a little bit of what we do. But yes, unless the panel have anything else to say, I am going to try and close us now. I just want to reiterate how important it is to talk about representation and to have some solutions in order how we best represent young people on and off screen. There's questions and comments that talked about religion. We had some that came in about normal things like acne, and not seeing young people on screen who have acne, even though it's such a common thing. We talked about disability, people in the LGBTQ plus community, ethnicity. It's all extremely important, and I feel like what I've seen today means that there are different media organisations really working hard to make sure young people's voices are represented, but there is still a lot more to do. If you are interested in a career in the media industry, I should say I am a former apprentice at the BBC myself, and they are actually open at the moment. So if you just go to the careers website on the BBC, definitely apply. The deadline is around about now. It possibly might be tomorrow, but I submitted mine on the day of the deadline, so you'll be totally fine. Just get it in now and apply now. But you also, if you follow at BBC Get In on Insta and Twitter, then they'll have loads of other details. But I know that Sky, Channel 4, Screen Skills, they all offer similar things too. We also have one called Extend, which is a trainee scheme for people who have disabilities. And if you want to hear some stories, some authentic young people's stories, then that is what BBC Young Reporter is all about. And we have a podcast called Hear Me, where you'll find it on BBC Sounds and and other well-known podcast providers, I should say. But yeah, really good young people's authentic stories in there. I just want to thank the panel as well, and everyone who submitted a question and a comment, and remind people that the session will be available to view again on the 50/50 website from tomorrow. bbc.com/50/50.